essentially is you want all your CTI ports to register to your subscribers first and then your publisher last. But for simplicity's sake for this tutorial, what I'm doing here is I'm essentially just going to leave it at the publisher. There is a user account that you need to create here on this screen, and what this is going to do is this will be a user account that gets associated to all JTAPI triggers, all CTI ports, all CTI route points, and it allows Contact Center Express to take control of those ports and those JTAPI triggers so that calls can flow from the Unified Communication Manager over to the Contact Center Express server. So what you do here is you actually create a username and password here, and via the Axle API that you specified up here, up top, UCCX will actually use Axle to go over to the call manager and actually create this user account and use that password. Now, the significance of this is if you have more than one UCCX server, you'll notice it'll create JTAPI user 1 for the first server, JTAPI user 2 for the second server. So if you see more than one JTAPI user account in your call manager, that's the reason you have more than one Contact Center Express cluster. We're going to do the same thing for RMCM. What RMCM is basically the subsystem, and I'll cover this in an additional video. RMCM is the subsystem that controls the agent's interaction with the Contact Center Express server. So you can think of JTAPI as the link that sends a call from call manager to UCCX, and you can think of RMCM as the link that UCCX goes and controls an agent and tells an agent's phone that, or agent's CAD, Cisco Agent Desktop, that hey, you have a call, and it allows the agent to take control of the call. Essentially, you want to order your your subscribers first, then your publisher again. For simplicity's sake in this video, I'm just going to integrate in the publisher, and here you need to give it a username and password again. So what I'm going to do is RMJTAPI user, and you have to specify a password. And essentially what you'll notice is the same thing I mentioned about JTAPI. If you have more than one Contact Center Express, it'll essentially create more than one user account for each server. And if you have NTP, what you can do here is throw in your NTP address, and then once you're done with all that, you just click on Next. Actually, it's going to tell me I need NTP, so I'm just going to throw in my NTP server here. Actually, while we're here, I'm going to back up a second. I think I might have misspoken a little bit. I believe this user account is going to create a separate user account for each call manager that you have. That way you'll see call manager 1 will have JTAPI user 1 that associates to all its CTI ports on that call manager, and then JTAPI 2 will be associated to the second call manager. If you play around in the call manager admin screen, you'll actually see what I'm referring to here. So what this is doing right now is it's actually going over to the call manager server and populating all that data over in the call manager with JTAPI user account, RMJTAPI user account, and I'll show you where that is in a second. Now this is a very important screen here. It specifies the number of historical report session licenses. Essentially what you do here is you're picking the number of HR sessions that you can run at one time. So historical reports, if you don't know, is a little program that you can run that will actually pull data from the Contact Center Express. There's about 35, 36 CAN reports. Actually, I think it's about 31, 32 CAN reports that you can run. That'll show you data about your call center, right? Peak call time, who called who, that kind of thing. And I'll have a separate module on that. But essentially what I'm going to do here is just select one. I want one HR session, or have one license for one HR session. The recording count here specifies the number of concurrent recording sessions that you can have going. If you don't know, the supervisor desktop or a CSD can actually record phone calls of an agent speaking to a customer. And the number of outbound seats. Outbound seats is essentially, there's a preview outbound dialer, which I'll cover in another lecture or another video, that'll let your agents place outbound calls when the call center is inactive or if you don't have any calls coming in. It's an outbound dialer campaign. So think of it this way. During a busy hour, you want your call center to take inbound calls, answering people's questions, but if your agents are just sitting around, you can actually present them a call to make outbound, maybe as a customer sat follow-up. Codec. This is a very, very important selection here. I would always recommend G711. G711 with over Ethernet as far as the packet size, is going to be 80K per call. Supreme call quality as opposed to G729. G729 is going to be about 24K per call. Again, the header size will vary depending on what layer 2 technology you're using. But essentially, G711 is what you're going to want to use for your codec. Reason being is, if you select G729, you're actually giving it the equivalent of a record player to digital or MP3 quality for your call center. So any of the scripts that you've written with any of the prompts, you'd actually be playing them back at G729, which will sound a little scratchy, a little fuzzy. Users might be able to tell the difference, so I would always recommend G711. One thing to point out here, if you do use G711, if your Contact Center Express is remote, which this gets into kind of the preview of Contact Center Express 8, you will need to transcode, and I'll kind of cover that in a more advanced topic. Once you've done all that, it'll tell you that your parameters are being saved. This is a pretty misunderstood screen here. Essentially what you have to do is pick the language. So you can pick any language that you want, and one thing I'll speak to is on the Contact Center Express server. If you go to CUCM program files wf-avid, this will actually create a folder for language, and then underneath language you'll see EN. Now what this does is you can actually specify the group default which all of your scripts will use, and then you can actually specify a country specific. Which I could say, like, I want it to be Canadian or Great Britain versus US. This selection here will affect the prompt path placement on the server, and once we get this thing installed, I'll try to go back and show you guys that. But be cognizant of this, because this can mess you up in the field when you start writing scripts, because you might be trying to access a script in the wrong prompt path. So for United States, I would just say EN US, group default, and country specific. And then finally, we've kind of goofed here. We need to actually create a user account that will be the app admin user account over here on the Contact Center Express. So what it's done is this is actually connected into Call Manager and say, give me a list of all user accounts. And I'm going to select one user account to be the application admin account. So if I go under user management here and then end user, click find. I don't have any end users, so I'm going to add one in. Say Alex. Give it a pin. Don't really need a pin for this example, but I'm going to go ahead and click save. Now essentially what I've done is create a user account. So if I flip back over here to my call center and then I do search again, I'll see that user account. Now what I'm doing here is actually moving it over, and I'm specifying that to be my user account or my administrator account that I want to use to log into the app admin page with. That's a very important thing. To do not skip this. If you skip this, you'll have to pretty much start over with your Contact Center Express installation. There is a hack that you can use where you can go back to the app admin page and run the cluster setup, which is what we're doing here over again, but I would not recommend it. So make sure you do that right the first time. And finally, you'll get a splash screen letting you know what all you've done as far as what's been activated. And essentially what you need to do here is close your web browser, and then when you reopen your browser now, you should be able to browse to the app admin page and be able to log in with those credentials that we just selected. So that was it.